Happy Friday. Welcome back. This is Expanding the Zone. I'm Shayne Combs here with my brother Matt, and this is show number 14. And you know, Matt, we always want to stay relevant. We always want to look at different things. And I think as we were looking at our topic, you and I had some really good ideas with the OHSAA and some competitive balance and some other things that we felt like were in and out of the news and kind of really relating this to the high school. And then trying to find, is there certain things at the college level or at the professional level or different things can be compared, or is it kind of silly in some cases to look at what they're doing and think that it applies to the smaller scale here at the high school level? So, you know, that's where our initial thoughts we're at. Obviously, the OHSAA has been in the news pretty heavy here the last couple of days. In fact, that's kind of why we delayed a day. And as I said, we're here on Friday, and we feel like we're going to add some different things to the show. Why don't we start there as I welcome you to the show? Just kind of your thoughts on where we were going with the OHSAA and where we think some of the current news kind of needs to almost kind of fit into our show and kind of have us adapt here a little bit as we go.
Yeah, we as you said, we had planned on talking some state association stuff with competitive balance, which I know we'll get into today. But also with the news that's come down here in Ohio the last couple of days, we've had a bizarre, I guess is the way I would describe it, couple days with our executive director Jerry Snodgrass being relieved of his duties. Not a voluntary, dismissal in any way. I mean, he didn't leave on his own. I guess, for lack of a better term, he was fired from his position, and
Right.
It's really bizarre timing if you think about it. The OHSAA right now is, I think most people would agree, is probably in the most turmoil-ridden time of their history. To be honest with you, it's you're right in the middle of this COVID pandemic. They're on the verge of having to make some decisions that could affect people's lives. They're I'm assuming probably in the worst financial shape they've been in the history of their organization.
I would think no question. Yeah.
Yeah, with the money they've lost, and to say, hey, this seems like a good time to cut loose our
Right.
executive director. That's, that like I say, that's bizarre to me. And I think, again, the public statements that have been made have all sort of been your politically correct type of thing of, hey, we appreciate all he's done. It's time to go in a different direction, all this. But the fact of the matter is, you'd have to be naive to think that this did have something to do with fall sports, with this COVID situation. I mean, obviously, that's the only thing on the Ohio High School Athletic Association's mind right now, as I would imagine is true for most state associations. So to sit here and think that, we let a guy go because of something that happened 2 years ago or something we're thinking a year down the road, no. There's only one thing on their mind right now, and that's this situation they're in. So my guess is there must have been an extreme difference in opinions to cause this, because let's be honest, Jerry Snodgrass was very well liked by the member schools. And I've had the chance to meet him a couple times. He is what I would consider a guy that brought a common man approach to a job that, historically you would consider sort of a suit. I feel like the OHSAA over time has had almost an elitist feel to it, where the coaches are sort of like the hired help. And hey, we're the OHSAA. Jerry brought a different approach of, hey,
Right.
He used to be a coach. I'm one of you guys. I'm on your side. Very, very well liked by athletic directors across the state, schools across the state. Not the type of guy I would highly doubt, knowing his reputation and character, that he did anything immoral, illegal, anything like that. So this had to be a major, like I said, difference in opinion between the board of control and the executive director. So we'll see what the future holds, but like I said, not great timing in my opinion.
That's what I echo a lot what you say about Mr. Snodgrass in terms of representation of our Ohio High School Baseball Coaches Association here in Ohio as well. And it's a little unfortunate. I'm not going to sit here and comment when I don't have all the facts, but it is certainly, I can't disagree with anything you said. And the thing that you said that really jumped out at me would be the timing of it all. Matt, when we look OHSAA, and we look at different topics here on this show this week here, show number 14. What do you think we can learn in terms of the college level, in terms of some of the decisions they're making? They're looking at travel considerations, money considerations. They're looking at conference schedules. The Big Ten just announced a lot of Power Five schools are said to kind of follow suit here probably pretty soon, trying to keep things more regional. Speaking of regional, it's kind of how the MLB is kind of setting up their 60-game schedule, playing your division or playing your counterpart division, if you will, in the other league. So when you look at a map of the United States, there's basically like 3 regional travel areas that are kind of being formed. The professional levels, the bubble there in Orlando, so forth. I guess my question for you is, what should the fans be aware of when we're talking here on this show about what is it proper for us to kind of be paying attention to learn in terms of our level here on the high school level, and what basically becomes irrelevant in terms of, hey, that just doesn't quite match?
I feel like the vast majority of it is an apples to oranges comparison, and it's just not relevant. I think to sit here and say, okay, and I've heard this comment a few times, well, how's high school going to have sports if colleges aren't having it, or colleges are cutting back their schedule?
Right.
It's an apples to oranges comparison. Again, I think I'm not saying that it won't lead to some decisions, but I hope that the decisions are made for the right reasons and not for that. Because I feel like if the people making the decisions for high school base their decisions on what college or pros are doing, they're just looking for justification. They're looking for an easy way to say, well, look, if they're not doing it, how can we do it? Rather than
Right.
stepping forward and being leaders during this pandemic. Because, for example, Ohio State football had a non-league game scheduled in Oregon. You're talking traveling completely across the country. I'm guessing that Ohio State,
Right.
when they travel, it's quite an ordeal. It's not just a football team. It's like a delegation of, there's media people, there's sports information people, so you're talking a huge
Well, there's
ordeal.
feeding, and there's
Oh,
housing and all those
yeah.
different things as you go. Sure.
So for them to say, okay, we're going to play a conference schedule, that makes some sense because, again, for them, you're cutting out major travel. At my school, if you say we're playing a conference schedule, then you've just cut out a 35-minute trip on a bus. It's not quite the same thing. So
Right. Right.
to compare those two, to me, and like the college situation, you're talking kids having to live together. You're talking kids from all over the country staying in housing on campus, having, like you said, eat together, live together, all those things. Again, not what you're dealing with at the high school level, where these kids are staying at their own house every night. They're only coming together for practice and games. Whether it can get done or not, I don't know. But let's not use the excuse of, well, pro and college aren't doing it, so how can high school do it? Let's make sure that we're just making decisions because it's the right decision. And look, the right decision may very well be don't play. I don't know. That's going to be for people, for health officials to get involved with, and people who are a lot higher up the chain than I am, okay, to make those decisions. All I'm saying is let's make the decision because in our heart, we feel like it's the right decision. Let's not look for validation, I guess, from a higher level.
I think those are some fair points. I mean, you mentioned Ohio State going out to Oregon. I know Michigan was going to Washington. I know Miami was coming up to Michigan State. Now, some people were a little disappointed because they felt like, a Bowling Green, Ohio State type of thing, so important to small schools. And I think it was Wisconsin, Notre Dame were supposed to play at Lambeau Field. So, I get it. But overall, I think what you're saying there makes a lot of sense. And I think it makes total sense when it comes to the high school level. I mean, I know we here in Southeast Ohio, we consider a long non-league trip about an hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, again, it's a completely different travel situation. You're traveling on a bus, which is the kids are going to, I assume, go to school if you're going to try that, in terms of going back
Right.
and so forth. So I guess I'll take it a step further. If we start to get into competitive balance and we start to get into some different this thing, one of the biggest headlines in the last year in college sports has become the transfer portal. And when we're talking about the transferring, we're talking about competitive balance. We're talking about how do you police all this. Yeah, I kind of ended up taking it as college just almost kind of said, hey, we're just going to kind of give you the one opportunity to go, and then hopefully that'll cover a lot of the. Are those things that you feel like make a little bit more sense, or is there something there to learn, or again, is this two different levels that just doesn't apply in your opinion?
I think it's hard usually in most cases to compare the college and high school ranks. I just think that it is. Now, you mentioned transfers. That's one of the, I guess, the three things I guess I had in my notes, Shane, coming into this show was when we talk about current competitive balance situation across our state, things that affect that fairness, right? That competitive fairness, really.
Mm-hmm.
One would be transfers. The student's ability to change his or her situation, and then the effect that has on the schools and all that. To me, again, and we talked about this a little bit in our rules episode a few episodes back, where it's so important if you're going to have rules to be able to enforce those rules. I guess part of me just feels like, and you and I have always probably looked at this transfer situation maybe a little bit differently, but I just feel like uh, that people are finding ways to skirt around the rules that the OHSA has put in place to limit transfers. And this has been one of the biggest battles the Ohio High School Athletic Association has fought. And it seems like it's a battle that they're losing, quite frankly, because it is one that they've lost in court. First of all, there has been cases where they've lost that battle legally, where and that's part of the reason the rules were changed. It used to be, remember, it used to be in our state a whole year. If you transferred and didn't meet an exception, you had to sit for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And now, it's half the season or whatever. Part of that is because they couldn't make it stand up. The other thing that's happening is the exceptions that are put in place, parents, quite frankly, are cheating. I'm just going to call it what it is, whether it be, hey, we've moved, but we really haven't moved, and we just have a place in that district that we can call, this is our address, but we really haven't vacated our previous property like we were supposed to. Or, I mean, this sounds crazy, but people have faked separations and legally gotten divorce proceedings started so that they could, have part of their family move to one school and part of their family stay in another school. And, it sounds crazy, but these things are happening. And it leads me to this, Shane, I guess, and this is a question I'd have for you. Do we get to a point where we're better off just saying, look, let's not have all these restrictions about transfers. If a kid wants to go to another school, this is America, right? I mean, if a parent wants to open and enroll their kid to a school and they want to make that sacrifice of driving a half hour down the road every day to get that kid to school, as long as that student's going and doing their work in the classroom and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, why shouldn't they be able to play an extracurricular activity? I guess I'm to the point where I feel like we talk about sports being an extension of the classroom. Well, but then we turn around and say, hey, even though this kid's going to class and doing all the things they're supposed to be doing at their new school, we're going to take away part of your season because we don't like the fact that you transferred. And I would even go, I would even take it a step farther. If that's when the moment that student arrives at their new school and that student enrolls, I guarantee you they're not going to be turned down if they want to join the band, if they want to be in the drama club, if they want to be in FFA, whatever. They're not going to tell that student no, but yet we're going to tell that student you're going to lose part of your season in athletics because you decided to change schools. Maybe there needs to be some restrictions, I suppose, on the amount of times you can transfer, whatever. I don't know, but I just feel like it's gotten to the point where it would make it more fair for everybody if we just allowed movement, so that certain schools weren't benefiting from transfers, maybe due to where they're located or whatever, and everybody could benefit the same way, and everybody would at least be on equal playing field. What are your thoughts on, I guess, the transfer part of it?
Well, I hate to see it go to that. I am open-minded to the fact that the law's the law, and I do know what you speak of there to be very true in terms of there's been situations at the OHSA that they've attended in court, and it goes far beyond a governing body of high school athletics here in the state of Ohio. So I understand there's different things there. I understand there's different rights. I hate to see it get to that point to where I feel like if we're not careful, I think what happens is high school sports become more of a club activity rather than an educated, school function type of athletic association. I think what happens, though, is what bothers me is the people who seem to be getting punished the most. And I know you as an AD have seen this. I know I, as a coach, as a teacher, my time as AD, I've seen this. The people who are punished are the people that oftentimes try to follow the guideline or try to go through the proper channels, and it's almost like they're telling on themselves, right? It's right. So I see both sides of it. My biggest fear, Matt, is turning it into this club activity. I know at the college level they've kind of went to that one opportunity to make a decision. You'd hope in a 4-year period that one time would cover a lot of those things. I wouldn't love that. That's probably the best compromise. But at the same time, where I defend the OHSA on this is when people are willing to go to the extremes that you just described, it becomes very, very difficult to police. I even hold certain schools accountable when certain schools are unwilling to be an extension of the OHSA. It becomes very difficult for them to police it. So again, there's plenty I disagree with the OHSA on. What I will say in terms of competitive balance, it hasn't been from a lack of effort. Again, I haven't agreed with every little detail or every math formula. I think there's some things out there, and I'll be curious to see what your second and third point are, there on your list would be, because beyond the transferring, Matt, I do think that there's some things that the OHSA has been unwilling to attack a little bit more, that might be just as much of the problem of competitive balance. So if you want to move forward there on your list, I'd be anxious to see where you're heading next.
Yeah. Before I move forward, let me hit one more thing here on this transfer, Shayne. I guess the issue I have is this. Okay, and again, as a coach, as an athletic director, and the fact that I grew up in a community where I loved the school that I went to, and we had a lot of school pride and all of that. I look at it through that lens. But then if I flip over to my parent and put my parent hat on, I have a real issue with not being able to choose where I want my son to go to school unless I punish him by taking away half his season. That's where my issue is with it too, is that do I not have that right? Because there are times where maybe, now I grant you, a lot of the times we hear transfers, it's people who are upset at a coach or whatever, and some of the reasons aren't always legitimate, right? And I'll show you, I'll transfer over here, and I'll join this team, or maybe it's easier to win over here. We talked about some of those, I think, in the previous show. But there are times where, hey, I can drive my son or daughter 15 minutes down the road and there's more educational opportunities. Maybe there's a better situation athletically. Maybe there really has been an issue that they couldn't overcome. Maybe. And there's situations sometimes where my son or daughter's not good enough to play at this school. They can go down the road and play at this other school. Why, as a parent, should I not be allowed to put my son in the best situation I can put him in, and put him in whatever school I want to put him in without him being punished? I guess that's where I keep going back to that. Does the OHSA cross lines when they basically say, hey, we're taking choices away from parents?
I think there's two comments there I would make. One maybe because of my small school perspective, the one thing I would challenge parents on, and again, I'm not a parent, so I'm not here to tell you where to let your son or daughter go to school. It's your own business. All I'm saying is, from a transfer standpoint, if you've decided that it's in their best interest, then go ahead and do it. What I see sometimes is there's such a justification to where they almost attack the school. It's almost one of those where well, this school doesn't offer this, or this school doesn't do this, or this coach didn't try to do this, or whatever it is. I don't think you have to, try to bury the small school. I mean,
Oh,
if you're sitting at a particular school A is, a D3, D4 school, and you're wanting to go to this D2 school over here, well, common sense tells you the D2 school probably has more resources, right? It's probably a little bit
right.
bigger. It's probably this, a little bit more of that. You don't have to attack the school and attack the coach on the one thing. The one thing I will challenge you, Matt, is I'm
And
not saying it
basically,
doesn't make the rule easier.
not to interrupt you, but basically what you're saying is, let's be honest, is just shut up and leave if that's what you want to do. I mean,
Right.
just
Right.
go.
No, right. I
You don't
still
have
see
to.
some people. I still see some people at their new school, and I mean, it might be 2 years later, and they still will take their jab at the old school on
Right.
Twitter, an old
Leave it
coach on
behind.
Twitter, and all. Yeah,
Right.
just you've already made your decision. What's it matter to you? It's not even your school anymore.
Right.
Now, the one thing I guess I will challenge you on before you move on, since we're talking competitive balance, I'm not saying it doesn't make the rule easier. I'm not saying it's not easier to police just to let them go do whatever they want. But where is the competitive balance being fixed by allowing that? Are we not going to have even more of the LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, hey, let's go here and play together type of thing? Where does the competitive balance get fixed in terms of your theory?
Well, it probably lead me to my next point when we start talking public versus private a little bit, public schools versus private schools. I think probably the area that it probably evens the playing field up the most would be where it allows public schools some of the same uh, benefits or opportunities to gain players as the private schools have. The public-private debate's been going on for a long time,
Sure.
and let's be real honest. Anybody who thinks that those two entities are on equal playing field is just naive. I mean, public schools and private schools are nowhere close to being allowed to do the same things and being on an equal fair playing field. I mean, you have private schools who can go out and openly recruit people. Now I know the state association is going to be like, no, they're not supposed to be recruiting players. They can, okay, they can go out, they can recruit people to come to their school. That's the whole point of a private school. Like, they can offer financial packages, they can say, hey, look at all the stuff we offer, and they can openly recruit people into their district. And to make matters worse, they can control their enrollment. Right? They can say,
Right.
we'll get into divisions here in a minute, but like in our state, like most states, your divisions are based on your enrollment. Well, now uh, a school can say, you know what? If we can limit our enrollment to this number, we'll be Division 4 or Division 3, and we'll have a big time advantage over, and the state has done some things with what they call competitive balance, which, you add some enrollment numbers based on where a kid lives in this, but it hasn't really solved anything. All it's done is take private schools and move them to other divisions, but it's still, regardless of what division they're in, it's unfair. Imagine the NCAA tournament, Shayne, with 64 teams in it, and imagine 20 of them get 13 scholarships to give people, and the other 44, I guess it's 68 now, right? The other 48, hey, you guys have open tryouts and see who's on your campus and throw a team together. And that's
Right.
basically what you're getting at. You get into the state tournament, and you have private schools who have chosen their players, and you have public schools that have held tryouts and just seen who was at their school. So to answer your question, as we get into this public-private and leave the transfers behind, the one thing I could see is the transfer would allow the public schools some of those same opportunities. I'll tell you this. I look back over the 20 years 20 plus years I've been coaching in our area as a head coach, and almost every single team from the Southeast District, from our part of the state, that has made it to the state Final Four in basketball has made it with transfer, has been helped by transfers in making it.
Sure.
They
Yeah.
did not make it. When I look at like the division I'm in, Division 2, every single school, okay, no exceptions, that have made it to the state finals, one of which won a state championship. Okay, one of those schools ended up winning a state championship. The rest of them did not, but made it to the state Final Four. In every single case, they were helped by transfers. That's in Division II. We had another team win a state championship at a lower division. Their best 2 players came from another district. I'm not criticizing those schools because, hey, if I were coaching and was lucky enough for a player to come in, that's
Sure.
great. Okay. All I'm saying is that's the only way that public schools can compete with private schools is the fact that those schools got transfers in, which made them a little bit more like private schools in that particular year or two, right? They happened during that stretch because those schools I'm talking about, they don't get transfers every year. Those schools I'm talking about, there's many years where they only have kids from their district. But guess what? The year they were good enough to make the state Final Four, you better bet your bottom dollar they had transfers. They had people come in from other districts. That's why they made it there. And so that's the one thing is it allows the public schools to at least come closer to competing with private schools.
Is the answer to keep trying to figure out the competitive balance, or is the answer just splitting the public and private? I know it's kind of a tough call, but these are the types of leadership calls that have to be made at the top. If you were in charge for a day and someone presented you with that, what's the answer? Is it better to keep on fighting the balance, or is it better off just to say, really, we need this to just be one is, like you said, a public, competition, where the other is more of a club travel sport type of situation?
Right. Well, if you're talking to me directly, I mean, specifically as a coach, I would say, oh yeah, I'd love to see them separated, right? Let's just move them over there and keep the public over here. Now, if I were actually like the leader of our association for a day, I don't know what decision I'd make because I'm gonna be real honest with you. I don't know the financial ramifications of that. I'm sure that the OHSA would take a financial hit a little bit anytime you lose a portion of your membership. Okay. Even though they don't charge schools to be a member, I'm guessing losing membership, you're going to lose some money. All right. So that'd be one area that I'm not smart enough to be able to answer that question on. All right. And then now, one thing I know that they've said over the years is they said, and I actually heard one of our previous executive directors, not Jerry Snodgrass, who we talked about earlier, but one before him, came into a meeting of our basketball coaches association once, and he said, the one thing we're concerned about, guys, if we ever allow public private to split, is that the private schools would go start their own athletic association, and then there'd be no rules whatsoever. Those guys, his exact wording was it would be like the wild, wild west. They would just stroll into your parking lot at 3:30 when school got out and start recruiting your kids. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. That's maybe that's like a dramatic picture being painted, but they're already recruiting our kids. Okay. So what's that? I mean, what's the change? They're doing it anyway. So I don't, to me, that argument doesn't hold a lot of water. Now that the financial argument, maybe. I don't know enough about that, Shayne, to be honest with you. So would I love to see them split? Yes. Is that feasible? I don't know. If it's not split, then we have to get into probably what we're going to talk about here in a minute. We got to look at increasing divisions.
Well, so far we've talked transfers, we've talked public, private, and as you get into divisions a little bit, these are some things that are very, very interesting to me. I see a lot of sports over the years that have been willing to have more divisions. I think a lot of it has to do with more postseason, more money. You see it again, the expansion of the football playoffs. Will COVID-19 slow that over the next year or two? I don't know. We'll see. When I've been a big fan of trying to push and push and push. I would love to see. Right now, we do it in 4 divisions, and when it comes to basketball, baseball, softball, those types of sports, I would love to see it go to 5. I just think it would help split a lot of things out there in terms of, again, competitive balance. I've coached at a school that I know what it's like to be the biggest Division IV team in the state of Ohio, and then I know what it's like for most of my career to be the smallest Division III school in the state of Ohio. So I get it. I mean,
Right.
to say it's not a difference is silly.
That's a huge difference.
And again, I'm not trying to rank teams. I understand that there's times we won Division III sectional titles that felt as good to me in terms of accomplishment as winning a Division IV district title. And that's not to take one away from the other. They're all special. All the groups. I'm just telling you what it is. It's a factor. And I guess, Matt, a lot of it is some of our sports operate in 2, some of our sports operate in 3. Gosh, football's up to what, 7?
Yeah.
To me, I guess in terms of, postseason, in terms of accomplishment, experiences, more and more kids getting an opportunity, more communities. I know, like in football, Matt, I understand like what a playoff run means to small communities. I understand what it means to watch your girls or boys basketball team go to the regional. It could even be just having some track or golf individuals at the state level, whatever it may be. To me, there's not a lot of negative there. I'm not trying to make it everybody gets a trophy. Okay. I'm just saying that, here in Ohio, what was it, Matt? Do you remember? I don't think you were playing quite yet. It was mid 80s. I think we were in 3 classes in most of these sports, and we went to 4 divisions.
Right.
Here we are almost 30 years later.
I think it was probably
84, maybe 5, somewhere in there. To me, it's about time. So, could divisions there on your list impact competitive balance if for no other reason, just making the gap not as big between what, say, the biggest school in this division is versus the smaller school?
There's absolutely zero question that the OHSA should increase the number of divisions they have in these other sports. Fact of the matter is, you start looking at the numbers here, Shane, and I looked them up while you were talking right there. I didn't want you to think I was just shooting some text off, while you and I were in the middle of the show. But I was actually looking up some. I was actually looking up some numbers here. When you look at football, and when you look at football, they have gotten it to the point where like in some of these divisions, your biggest gap is like 40 players. In other words, like in Division 6, you have the bottom number is 122 and the top number is 162. Okay, so you're talking a 40 player gap in that division. Now, as you go up in some divisions, those gaps widen a little bit. But when you start looking at basketball, take Division 2, which is the division I happen to coach in. Think about this for a second. Your smallest school was 206. And your biggest is 351. Well, let me tell you something. There's a huge difference if you have 206 and you're playing somebody that has 351. That's a big, big difference. Throw in the private factor, which in every division you have, that number's really inflated a little bit because of their ability to recruit players. So I honestly think that there's the biggest thing the OHSA is going to have to do for competitive balance is increase divisions, because we didn't even talk about some of the smaller sports like golf and cross country and some of these sports that have less than 4 divisions. They only have a couple,
right. 2 or 3 at the most. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're even less competitively balanced. And, I think basketball, let's be honest, the reason that they don't want to change divisions is that 4 division fits neatly into their state tournament weekend where you start on Thursday and you finish on Saturday. My argument's
the money. Yep.
Well, yeah, but my argument's been that. Well, yeah, but I'm saying, is there not more money to be made?
Well, that's what I'm saying in terms of everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, right. I understand you might be losing money on a regular season, volleyball non-league match, but I'm saying you're not losing money at the volleyball regional.
No, I mean, like, let's say the boys state tournament in basketball started on Wednesday instead. Okay. And you either had to squeeze an extra final game in on Saturday, or if you added a couple divisions, maybe you had to let it spill over into Sunday for state championships. All right. Why not go Wednesday through Sunday? And add 2 divisions, make 6 divisions in basketball. Think about what that would do to the competitive balance of the sports, just to do that right there. And it'd be an easy fix. I mean, like I said, just you basically, you have to have the facility for 2 more days. I grant you, Wednesday through Sunday, but you're going to make that money up in your ticket sales and all that. In my opinion, they could add 1 division. The fact that they are experimenting with like 1 ticket getting you 2 games now instead of a separate ticket for every game. You could probably add 1 division and figure out a way to still squeeze it into into that Thursday through Saturday format. You see what I'm saying? I mean,
do.
it'd be tight. It'd be tight. You may still, I don't know, you may still have to go a Wednesday night game, but I don't know. I think you could almost squeeze it in there if you wanted to. I just think that would, right now, out of everything we've talked about, because let's face it, they're never going to separate public private. That's not going to happen anytime in the near future for sure. The transfer thing, they're probably not going to completely give up on, like I think they probably should do, and just let it go. But the divisions would be the easiest thing. Wouldn't you agree to fix? Just, hey, we're going to add 2 divisions in basketball. We're going to add 2 divisions in baseball, softball. I mean, to me, how hard is that? I just don't see that being extremely difficult. Maybe I'm missing something.
No, I completely agree. So, I mean, I think even though we don't maybe agree completely on every single aspect of the 3 things, I think overall that we believe those 3 things really attack competitive balance. I want to kind of, change, gears a little bit here and talk about those 3 things, but at the same time, maybe even wrap COVID-19 back into
Right.
this and just
It's
decision
hard.
making of
It's hard
OSSF.
not to. We talked about not wanting to, when we started this show, not to get eaten up with the COVID deal, and we have in a lot of weeks. But let's face it, we talk about
Can't
current
talk high school
events.
sports
Yeah, I
without
mean,
it,
this is
right?
the biggest thing going on right now.
Right. So I guess, Matt, first let me just, if you'll give me a couple of minutes here, just let me kind
Yeah.
of, throw this out there, and then I really have something, serious I want to throw at you. When you've heard me say before, a lot of times I'll use an example of people in decision making will say, well, what makes a great decision or what makes a poor decision? And I think it's that whole success is in the eye of the beholder. I think I teach kids a lot of times, hey, let's be proactive. In the middle school classroom, we talk a lot about how if you can learn to limit stress, that helps. But at some point, I have to teach you to manage stress, because the reality of our world, right, we're going to deal with stress. There's nothing wrong with being
Right.
organized. There's nothing wrong with being all those different things to try to limit stress, try to take some of those things off your plate. But in the real world, you're going to have deadlines. Kids are going to have assignments to do. They're going to take tests. They're going to take tests that the results are very, very important to their future. As adults, we're going to have deadlines. We're going to have bills to pay. We're going to have, health issues, or we're going to have family people go through tough times, or, that's just the reality of life. And I guess that's some of the things that come to my mind when I look at unfolding an idea that is going to attack some of these tough decisions. And this is something I've always used in leadership, Matt. I've never shared it on the show, and I want to throw it out to you. And I want to kind of use it as a base here over the next 5-10 minutes in some different examples to see if you think it fits. This is basically Shayne's idea of leadership. Okay.
Right.
So I take the word idea, IDEA, and I simply ask, to look at those different letters as we go. And I think the first thing we have to do is we have to inform ourselves. Okay, so you gather all of this information and you educate yourself a little bit. And that's in anything. So that's in competitive balance, COVID-19, whatever it may be. Then we have to make a decision. I think what happens in leadership sometimes, there's tons of value in our surveys. There's tons of value in getting your employees' feedback. There's tons of value in coaching of getting your players' feedback. But at some point, leadership has to decide. Agree? So, I mean, there has to be a decision made that has to go. The next thing is you have to execute. So you have to execute your plan. You have to go about it with the information you've gathered, the decision you've made, stand behind it, communicate it, execute it to the best of your ability, understanding you may have to adjust along the way, adapt, or whatever it may be, but you're trying to execute your plan. And then the last thing I've always felt like is you have to be accepting of the critique. The acceptance becomes very important in terms of there's going to be positive feedback, there's going to be negative feedback, and in this particular situation, I'm going to get to examples later. I wanted to throw that to you up front, and I would ask you, do you feel like those types of things can apply here? And what is it that jumps out that maybe is too vague? What would you add to it? What would you tweak in it? But in terms of, again, inform, decide, execute, and then accept, talking again, acceptance of, critique, and accepting that sometimes it may not turn out good, right? Sometimes,
Right.
hey, I made a poor decision or I executed poorly. Just your thoughts on my idea of leadership before I maybe throw some different examples at you.
Yeah, I hadn't heard you break it down that way before. It's interesting, and I like that. I agree with a lot of that. I think right out of the gate when you said inform, we talked last week so much about when we talked about like old school, new school, we talked about knowledge playing a role in how we change, right? I mean, the knowledge that you get from information over the years has caused you to change and do things differently. So that knowledge is crucial. And then we've talked before, especially with this COVID situation and with any situation in leadership, the decision making, somebody has to be first, right? Somebody has to be the first one to step up and say, we're going to try it this way. And then, like you said, when you come up with a plan, all you can do is what we always tell our players: control the controllables. Like one of the things I think I heard the other day that I really like: all successful people do a couple things. Successful people, they have a next play mentality. They think, okay, what's next? What is the next thing on my plate here? What's the next thing I have to do, rather than living in what's went wrong or whatever, right? And then the other thing they do is they control what they can control. And this goes to that execute part of your plan here, carrying it out. What's next? Control the controllables, and then stick with the process, right? It's a process. It takes time. Successful people tend to do those three things. What's next? Control the controllables and stick with the process. And then your last one, the accept, you even added, I think accidentally almost added another A with adapt or adjust, because I would almost throw that in there. As you're carrying out your plan, there may have to be some adjustments, right? There may have to be some changes, some adaptations, but that's part of it. And then at the end, you're a leader, put on the big boy pants. You're going to have to accept the critique. That's just the way it is. Most people that are in leadership positions are there because of their experience, because people think they're experienced enough and smart enough and well informed enough to make a decision. So they're trusting you to make that decision and do the best you can. And with that, though, is going to come armchair quarterbacks or Monday morning quarterbacks, right? Where they come in and say, well, you should have done it this way. Well, hindsight's 2020, right? That the people are going to do that. All you can do is have the knowledge, make the decision, do your best to carry it out like you talked about. And then whatever the critique is, that's what it is.
Well, I guess some different things come to my mind. If we're looking at it from a COVID-19, or I think it even applies into some of our competitive balance things. I looked up some stats here before we end up coming on the air. In the MLB, for example, they've tested. I think they had like 66 positive tests. Okay, there was 58 players and there was 8 staff members. Well, that was out of 3,748 tests. That's 1.8%. Now you have to be accepting of people making decisions. I don't know if you heard, Matt, just right before we come on the air, Buster Posey had opted out. I know David Price had already. So there's big name guys. Again, hey, this isn't for me this year. I don't feel safe. Or you heard Avery Bradley in the NBA. I've got a son with some respiratory issues and different things.
Right.
I can't take that risk. Again, you have to be accepting that not your decision won't be for everybody. But you're informing yourself and you're making a decision and you're executing a plan. And I give like the PGA, Jay Monahan, the commissioner, I give them a lot of credit. They informed themselves, they executed a plan. They've played now. They're in their 5th week of play, and yes, they've had positive tests, but they've had a protocol in place that have safely been able to remove those people, get them quarantined, get them retested, and some of the ones that have been out are back now. It's one of those things, I guess. If you're looking for perfection, I don't know what decision out there ever hits 100% popularity. I don't know which one ever hits 100% effective. But don't you feel like that makes a ton of sense here in terms of, I don't care if you're talking about transfer. I don't care if you're talking about, the division. There's going to be some schools that the extra division, they might feel like that's not for me, or
Right.
or the whole private school type of thing. But in the COVID-19, in terms of if we're trying to decide to go back to school, if we're trying to decide to play a high school sport, it's probably not realistic. It's kind of like my stress example. We have to do what we can to limit it.
Right.
But if your goal is to eliminate it, then that's probably going to be an impossible solution. So don't you think the discussion starts there in terms of decision making? What's our ultimate goal? Are we moving forward looking for a limitation, or are we looking for elimination? Do you see where I'm going with that?
Well, yeah, because as when you look at this whole COVID situation, there's only one theoretically safe way to do things, right? And that's just to do what we did back in March and April, just shut
Right.
it down.
Shut it down.
Right. And we all stay at our house. And if we do that, the spread of this thing will rapidly decrease like it did then. And we can all say, hey, we're being safe. If that's what you're looking for, then that's what you've got to do. If we're looking for trying to go to school, trying to play sports, and all of this type of stuff, then you have to be willing to assume some level of risk. I think the part that's been frustrating to me is we get caught in the middle a lot on this. It's like we want both. We want to be able to play sports, we want to be able to go to school, but we want to be perfectly safe. That option doesn't exist. Okay, it just doesn't. The only way to be safe is just to shut everything down. And I think it's kind of like, as a teacher or in education, we could sit here and say, hey, just shut it down. But if you're a private business owner,
Right.
right, and your paycheck depends on people coming through those doors, that's a little unfair for me to say, let's just shut it down till this thing blows over, we get a vaccination, while other people are going bankrupt. Because there's people out there that don't want it, that can't do that, can't afford to do that. So I think it's the same way with like you mentioned the test. We're going to have to get to a point where it's how we react to these tests. Don't you think? How do we react to these positive tests? Does it cause us just to shut everything down, or are we able still to move forward with whatever we're doing, whether it be kids going to school, whether it be kids playing sports? Because it's naive to think that, hey, if we take these precautions, that the positive tests will just go away. They're not going away. There's going to be some positive tests.
So what's your reaction when I tell you 1.8%, or what's your reaction when I say the NBA is up to around 7%? About half of those have been handled properly.
Right.
So a lot of them feel like the crucial concerns are around I think I read today 2.3. Again, who am I to say if again 1.8 were my family?
That's the thing. I mean,
but I guess when I'm throwing that out there as a leader to you, what's your reaction to numbers like 1.8 or 2.3 or so forth when you're trying to say now correlate that into a smaller high school type of decision where we're starting to form these committees to decide, okay, what does school look like? What does high school sports look like?
Well, that's what makes it extremely difficult, because especially take the educational component for a minute, okay? Because you can make the argument, I suppose, that, hey, if we shut down sports, they're an extracurricular activity. Some people would say they're not absolutely necessary. I would argue that they're more necessary than you think, because for some kids, that's all they have as either a distraction from a bad home life, motivation to do well in school, in some cases, a ticket out of their community and on to college someday. So I would argue sports are more important than some people give them credit for. But let's just take the educational piece for a minute. If as a leader, you give me those numbers, I have to weigh this. I have to weigh, on one hand, is one kid getting extremely sick from this one too many? All right. And in that case, should I just shut everything down until we get some sort of cure or vaccination, whatever? Or do I have to make the decision based on the vast majority's, well-being? Because What about the third grader who already struggles to read? And now we take another year off school
and
and
already
do
lost their fourth 9 weeks last year.
yeah, lost their fourth 9 weeks. They struggle to read. Now they can't go to the third grade. We're going to do online learning, which, let's be real honest with you, at that age can't happen. They're not learning in the third grade online. Let's not tease ourselves. We're doing that in an effort to show that we're trying to do something. Okay. I don't think there's very many teachers around that you're going to be able to get the truth out of that tells you, oh yeah, that stuff really works. You don't really need to be in the classroom. We know better than that. So now what happens when that kid gets so far behind that he struggles to read in the fourth grade, in the fifth grade, and this thing just follows him all the way up through his schooling? Okay, no one wants to talk about that, right? This COVID thing, hopefully someday, will be a distant memory, but this kid's education is taking a hit that he may never recover from, or at least not recover from for a number of years. So I guess you have to ask yourself the question of that 1% or 1.5% that's affected, is that enough to negatively affect the other 99% of the population? I don't know. You can make an argument both ways. For me, and I said this before, I think there comes a certain time where you do whatever you can do in terms of precaution. I'm all for that, whether it be kids having to wear masks while they're in the building or whatever, okay? But there comes a point in time where you have to assume some risk. As a leader, you have to say, hey, look,
But again,
we can't
you
just
can offer, I think it's the acceptance, don't you think? I mean, there's still,
right.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I just
No,
think
go
there's
ahead.
an acceptance of, hey, Buster Posey doesn't think this is for him this year. You see what I'm saying? Like at the
Well,
high
you
school
have to
level,
give people
if a
choices.
parent says,
Yeah.
hey, this isn't for me, I think they need to be online. Or, if you're playing a volleyball game and you're going to offer a Facebook Live, hey, I don't think I can attend that. You see what I'm saying?
No,
Like there has to be decisions.
that's well, in America, we're based on choices. Am I right? I mean, this is
Right.
a country of choices. You have to give people those choices. If a parent doesn't feel comfortable with their kid coming to school, then I think the school has to provide an alternative education. Okay. My point is, should you force that alternative education on every student in your school?
Right.
And that's where it gets a little tricky. Like, hey, we want to offer you this option, but we're not going to force this option on our entire student body because some people feel okay with their kid coming to school, and the school doing what they can to distance, to put masks on, to sanitize, to do the stuff that we can do to try to slow this thing until hopefully a vaccination comes up.
So now if I take my inform and making decision and executing and kind of being accepting, I want to go back full circle now and talk about competitive balance, COVID-19. I don't care what you want to use in answering this, but there's some things that I find that club sport versus the link of high school sports to the education circle, that becomes a very interesting dynamic. Like the best analogy I can use is a high school baseball coach. For years and years and years, it's been hard to figure out junior high baseball. And most schools do not recognize junior high baseball. They don't want to bus it. They don't want to pay coaches. They don't want to do those different things, right? When a lot of coaches will tell you, it's kind of better that they don't, because now we have a little bit more free reign to kind of schedule the way we need to, or to let them ride the games with parents, or again, it's more of a club sport, basically. Do you see where the leadership, when it comes to the tie of education or school sports in comparison to the club sports, leadership becomes a trickier dynamic because of the guidelines that you fall under, or maybe even the public eye? Because when I think of making decisions, Matt, the basketball tournament, right? TBT, Elam Mending and all, it's out there playing, right? And they
Right.
have
Right.
protocol and they play. And if people don't want to go, don't go. And if people don't want to watch, don't watch, whatever. But all of a sudden, if that were high school basketball, or if that were NCAA basketball, you'd have far more people from the other side saying, I can't believe they're playing that basketball tournament. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I see
Right.
Legion baseball being played. I see some little league baseball starting to unfold and go. It seems to me that a lot of people out there don't look at club sports as being a bad future of sports, because it would give them a little bit more freedom to kind of lead it or execute it or just run it, the way they see fit. Do you see that, and where do you fall on that? As an athletic director, you've got to really be torn there a little bit in terms of considering where we might be heading in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I'll say two things. One, I think that the reason that your club sports, the TBT or your little leagues or whatever, don't fall under the same criticism as your NCAA or your high school is, I think it's viewed as a complete personal choice whether you want to play those sports, which I feel like at the college level, let's face it, those kids are on scholarship. So do they have a choice? I don't know that they do, right? I mean, their choice is to not have their education paid for, so they're a little bit more under the control. High school, you have a choice, but at the same time, you only get 4 years to play. You know what I mean? Are you gonna let your teammates down and just say, hey, I'm not gonna play this year? So I think that's probably part. Don't you think? Before I go on to my next point, don't you think that's a little bit of it? Like it's probably viewed more as like an individual choice.
Yes. Yes.
So, but to go back to your acronym there of IDEA, the informed decision, execute, and accept, as it pertains to to the club sport versus your interscholastic sports, things like that. It's funny, part of the club sports, and I know, as a public school person, as an AD and coach, we're supposed to hate all club sports. All right, I get it, AAU and all that. I don't, because part of their success has been because they have been willing to increase their knowledge of what their people want. All right. So that's the inform. They've made decisions based on what people want, what their people want, the people participating. They've carried it out, whether people like it or not, on the outside. Hey, this is our plan. We're going to execute it. And they could care less. They've accepted the critique, right? What I'm saying is, take my OHSAA, take that and put it in with your example. Their knowledge, I've said this before, the OHSAA, in my opinion, makes no effort to find out what coaches need and want, what players need and want. They make decisions based on what they feel like is the right thing to do without really diving into the people that are kind of on the front lines, so to speak, in the trenches every day, and really in finding out what they need. So that's that knowledge piece. They don't really have the knowledge, all the knowledge necessary, in my opinion, to make great decisions. The decisions, when they do make a decision, it's not even their decision half the time, because we talked about the National Federation of High Schools making the rules and many of the decisions, and the OHSA just going along with it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're not even stepping up to make the decision. The execution, many of their rules are unenforceable. We've talked about that. We talked about tonight with transfers. So you're not even able to execute a plan or carry it out because you don't have the manpower to enforce the rules that you make. You make rules and then can't enforce them. So as I look at that, I ask at times, like, I think the improvement of the state associations will come with getting more input from the coaches, from the athletic directors, from those people that are fighting these battles every single day. All right. And then being willing to make decisions, what's best for your state, not what's best for the National Federation or any other state, but what's best for your state and situation. And then putting together a plan to actually carry that out and execute it. But so I guess, I don't know if that completely answers your question, but I guess that would be my, how I would take what you talked about and maybe tie it in.
Well, Matt, I think it leads real well into some of the thoughts I was going to put in my final thoughts. Before I go to final thoughts, is there anything on your regular show agenda there that we were cutting you off on?
No, we covered it.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and go first in final thoughts, and if that's okay, because I guess here's my take on this. The one thing you said that I think so important in leadership is you would love to put in guidelines. You'd love to put in rules. You'd love to have structure. But again, you have to be realistic in what it is you're trying to accomplish it, and can I accomplish it? Mm-hmm. And enforcing of rules is something we just talked about this on a show a couple of weeks ago. a lot of times the problem with writing rules or having rules, Matt, is certain rules are just kind of vague and difficult to enforce. For example, if we're going to go back to school, they're saying staff members should wear masks. Okay, well, we can enforce that. Okay, we're adults, we're employees, we should do that, or you'd be held accountable. Fine. But notice how many things they kind of recommended, or they said, hey, we would like for you to do this, because again, they understand that in this county or in this school with 2,000 kids compared to this school with 500 or whatever it might be, there's different dynamics everywhere that play a role. And I think that's important to understand. I guess what I would say in final thoughts is this: when it comes to guidelines, rules, be it in competitive balance OHSA, be it COVID-19, be it going back to school, be it playing a sport, whatever it might be, you have to respect leadership to know that they are putting things out there. And if your goal is elimination of risk, then again, you need to make those proper decisions the way people all the way up to the professional levels have, in terms of, hey, I'm opting out, that's not for me, whatever it may be. I don't think that's safe. Maybe that's an online education compared to an in-class education, and weighing, what you get out of both and what you deem the risk necessary. But my point is, if you are looking at it from an elimination standpoint, then that's kind of the road you're going to have to go. If you're willing to be open-minded to a limitation, then I think you have to respect leadership to the point of seeing their plan, helping execute their plan, and then not having an overreaction. There's going to be positive tests. We are going to have teachers have positive tests. We're going to have students have positive tests. We're going to have student athletes have positive tests. Every sport, I believe that. Every one of them. And we have to figure out at what percentage is too much. We did this last year with the flu. They had a certain number. The flu was going to a different level here in Southeast Ohio than it's ever been. Schools were canceled for the first time in decades for the flu. And it was based on a percentage. They felt like, hey, here's what's normal. Here's what's getting excessive. We got to do something about it. Well, obviously in the COVID-19, that this is that flu on steroids. I mean, this is huge, but we have to figure out what is going to be that level of limitation that we're willing to accept. And I think once that's established by the leadership, then it's up to all the other people to determine, hey, that's not for me. That doesn't make sense to me. Hey, I see where they're coming from there. I think
choices.
I think I can play there. I'd rather my kid not play in that. I'd rather my kid not go to school in that environment. And again, that's the acceptance. You're going to have to understand that some people are going to look at your plan and be like, man, that's ignorant. And then you're going to have some of it be like, hey, that sounds good, let's go. And I think that's the acceptance. So, gosh, I understand how difficult a time this is, and it almost makes the competitive balance talk seem kind of unneeded, but I think decisions are decisions. I think we can separate here. It's tough to shut out the COVID-19, but even in our topic of competitive balance, I think there's a lot of things out there for people to have choices, and for other people to say, hey, that's not for me, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, and I will, with my final thoughts, Shayne, I will focus on just the competitive balance part, because I think you did a nice job covering the other side of that a little bit. And I agree. For me, just from the competitive balance part of our show, I would leave you with this. If you're an organization that's in charge of anything competitive, anything athletic or competitive, whatever the case may be, your number one priority, I would say, let's set safety aside, because I think probably your number one priority in anything is probably safety. Okay. Right. But after safety, your next priority is it fair? It has to be competitively fair. If you're going to run a tournament, you're going to run an organization that has to do with athletics. I don't care if you're running Tuesday night men's golf league. All right. That there's a reason why there's handicaps, and I have to give a guy 2 shots on the front or whatever, because you're trying to level the playing field, right? You are
trying to make a competition. Yeah.
Yes. Otherwise, it's no fun because it's not fair competitively. If you look at the major sports, I feel like football gets it right more than Major League Baseball or NBA basketball because they make it where every single team has a chance. When you go into a year, because of the way they do a salary cap, because of the way they give their players, right or wrong, they give their players much less control and say than what Major League Baseball, for instance, gives their players, correct? You know, football players have much less control over their salary, over movement than some of the other sports. That, the salary cap, the profit sharing on TV profits, all those things, if you think about it, make every NFL team a contender every year. You see it all the time. An NFL team go from worst to first, right? Everybody has a chance. Now, a lot of Cleveland Browns fans around here would call me a liar on that, but trust me, Cleveland fans, you got a chance. It's like in Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance.
Yes.
But no, it's one of those deals where the best organizations make sure that the competitive spirit doesn't get broken, doesn't get abused. That's where our athletic association has to do a better job, because right now it's not fair. It's not fair. They've tried some things. I'm not saying that the some of the stuff they've tried hasn't helped a little, but it hasn't pushed it in the right direction the way adding divisions would, separating public-private would, some of the things we talked about tonight. So to me, competitive balance may be, outside of safety, the biggest issue of a successful sports organization.
Well, I think that's, I think on the show this week, I know we were balancing 2 or 3 different things
Right.
there, but I think in the end, they do tie all the way back to the state of the OHSA, and obviously the OHSA is handling something that's been unlike any other thing they've ever had to. It's having an impact on them like nothing ever has. You know, anything at all they've ever dealt with is unlike this. So, and with the recent news, as you started the show with, Matt, I think it kind of shows you just the reason we needed to go the route we did on this show. So we'd love to hear your feedback. Check us out through email, admin1@svcsportzone.com. Looks up on Facebook, Twitter, svcsportzone.com, SVC Sports Zone Shayne there on Facebook. You can leave me a private message. You can also get involved through, we've had some nice messages there on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Buzzsprout, all those different things. And then obviously here on our YouTube channel, SVC Sports Zone Shayne. So on that note, Matt, I think we'll get out of here. It's been a good show. Again, show 14 here, looking at the OHSA, and we look forward to getting back with you next week as we come up on show 15, and we appreciate the ongoing support. So until then, for Matt Combs, this is Shayne Combs. Appreciate everybody watching Expanding the Zone. Thanks, everyone.